They say the future belongs to the mad, but if we pull through together, we'll survive. This is a review of Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Hello everybody, ScotsThinker here, and welcome to my review of Mad Max Fury Road, a film which I've only just seen this year in 2025, 10 years after its release. Yeah, for some silly reason, I didn't take the time to watch Mad Max Fury Road when it initially released. Not even the monochrome black and white stylized version. Sorry, With that said, throughout this year, I did actually take the time, thanks to my friend Lewis, as well as our other friend Alex, to watch the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies. So I actually have a unique perspective on Mad Max Fury Road. I didn't go into Fury Road on its own. I actually watched the other Mad Max movies first. If you want to know more about my take on the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies, I'd recommend you follow me on Letterboxd for more details there. But suffice to say, I consider at least two of the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies to be mostly mediocre. Whereas with Mad Max 2, I understand that it is such a revolutionary action movie. I can understand how it even influenced Hideo Kojima in regards to conveying storytelling through action and the visual storytelling from therein. That kind of visual storytelling and action directing seems to be what George Miller thrives in. And it's obvious if you watch the Mel Gibson movies, his budget gradually increased, making for more crazy visuals. The original Mad Max movie was considered the lowest budget movie ever made up until Blair Witch Project beat that record, if I remember correctly. And Mad Max 2 to this day is declared as one of the most historically significant action-oriented movies of all time. Now, in the year of 2015, there was a bit of a significant shift in regards to how this series was being presented. The budget had increased exponentially, and Mel Gibson had sadly grown too old to play the physically demanding role of Max, so Tom Hardy had to take his place. But fortunately, Tom Hardy does manage to do the character justice. He obviously did his research on Mel Gibson's character.
Just leave it at that.
But it's really cool, and I like that kid that Tom Hardy guy.
Oh yeah, he seems to be doing quite well.
No, he's interesting. He's a
in
very
everything.
interesting actor, yeah. And he's like, he reminds me of one of my sons a little bit.
I mean, Max himself isn't the most charismatic man alive, but still, the role is very physically demanding just due to the sheer amount of stunt work as outright danger that Max puts himself in. Or, well, unintentionally puts himself in order to survive, you get what I mean. And due to George Miller's preferred method of storytelling for this series, you can go into any particular Mad Max movie as a standalone movie, whilst all of them are somewhat telling an ongoing story about this one man surviving during apocalyptic times, starting off with pre-apocalypse, and then the rest of it being post-apocalyptic times, and how despite his selfish-oriented flaws, somewhere deep down inside, he still wants to help others. These are the kind of stories that people during the apocalypse would gather together to tell of this lone wolf who did all these heroic kind of stuff. That was the kind of angle that George Miller intended to portray these stories. And that's why you can go into any of these movies as standalone films. Although, to give a brief summary, the first Mad Max movie was mostly uneventful, with some particular highlights, as well as an oddly abrupt ending. Mad Max 2 is a brilliant bit of action directing, with everyone involved in that picture. Thunderdome had the charismatic Tina Turner, as well as a few other particular highlights. But the plot ended up being somewhat confusing by the time this other tribe got into the picture, if you know what I'm talking about. So now, Mad Max Fury Road. Could George Miller live up to those expectations? Well, as you can tell from the title of this video, absolutely yes. Not only does this movie live up to the likes of Mad Max 2 particularly, but if you ask me, it even exceeds it to the point where Mad Max Fury Road by itself is one of the greatest action movies ever made. The reason why it's such a strong standalone movie is because George Miller took everything that he learned from the previous movies, both the good and the bad, and managed to master his craft in what many consider to be his crowning achievement. So, in Mad Max Fury Road, Max is doing what he does best, surviving, until he gets caught up by this warlord who is trying to... And the warlord and others find out what they're up to, so, with Max held prisoner for pretty demented reasons, they go after Furiosa... They go after Furiosa and the wives that she's escorting out of there, subdue everything around him and assert his dominance, and he has plans to have several wives who will bear his children, but one of his own agents, Furiosa, but one of his agents, Furiosa, doesn't like that plan, so she secretly smuggles his wives out of there and hightails it out of there during a mission to get more oil. She takes off on a big truck, diverging from the path to get to the oil, and what entails is one of the greatest car chases you'll ever see in cinema. This car chase pretty much takes up the entire movie. Yeah, there's pauses and breaks for character moments, of course, but it's undeniable that the entire movie is just one long, epic chase. This entire chase is up there with the final chase scene from the Blues Brothers. It has all the spectacle involved, and it is elevated by the fact that there's so much impressive practical effect on display. It's just you really have to see it for yourself. You're going to think like, wow, they really drove those motorbikes over this specific truck. Wow, they really made this truck have this thing go down to make the sand go up. Wow, they really made these actors do all this completely dangerous stuff. And on and on and on it goes. Like, really, wow, they wrecked those cars. Wow, they really did this and that and this and that. I mean, of course, there's a lot more CGI in this film than all the other Mel Gibson movies combined, true. But the CGI actually complements the practical effects, so the film keeps this grounded feel to it whilst still allowing room for all the spectacle. The visual storytelling is very strong. I'm about to play you a clip. This clip is my best example of one of the finest examples of visual storytelling. If you've never seen this film, you can just watch this one clip and completely understand everything that's going on. Observe. I don't think I even need to describe what's going on, because the visual storytelling is so strong in this particular scene. You already understand who's chasing who, what their motivations are, and the interconnected character relationships all in a few seconds. That is impressive visual storytelling. I don't think I've seen visual storytelling this strong since Gennady Tartakovsky's Samurai Jack. That is impressive. What makes this movie particularly profound in a way is the fact that George Miller implements this strong visual storytelling into a narrative that's all about the conflict between hopelessness and hope, which is rather fitting for a post-apocalyptic setting. If you've been keeping up with the Mel Gibson movies, not only are you going to catch on to the fact that George Miller is repeating certain plot beats from previous movies and pretty much celebrating them and amplifying them in his crowning achievement of a movie, but also you'll notice that in each Mad Max movie, the landscape has gotten gradually worse due to the lack of water resources and so on and so forth. And in this movie, the Warlord, who, fun fact, is played by an actor from the first Mad Max movie, the Warlord has radicalized his followers into believing the Norse concept of Valhalla, that you'll only make it to this Viking paradise if you kill yourself in a glorious battle if you die in the midst of glorious battle. So, because of that, that is a pretty clever excuse to have the most over-the-top deaths on screen during this kind of intense chase scene. But we gradually see themes of redemption at play. One particular character, played by Nicholas Hoult, oh, what a day! What a lovely day! Sees a redemption in many ways. And it's interesting that they cast Nicholas Hoult here. I mean, with the standard face, he has a sympathetic look, but he has enough facial expression to look crazy whenever he needs to. So, his character, through a series of events, goes through a redemption arc. And redemption is another key theme in this particular movie. He starts off believing that his life is of no use other than to die in the most glorious way possible if he can. It's interesting how this movie depicts the concept of Valhalla, and it's quite a unique approach that Vinland Saga, for example, probably hinted at, but this film delves more exclusively, and that is the concept that believing in Valhalla is a very reductionist idea, because it reduces the worth of your life to the following premise. I cannot say I've lived a good life unless I've died in a glorious battle. I mean, of course, if you were to apply that kind of mentality to something like, say, hypothetically, the Halo franchise or Band of Brothers, then yeah, you want to die glorious death, be a hero. But the way it's portrayed in the Mad Max Fury Road, it's very reductionist, and it's portrayed as if to say, you have no worth in your life. There is no hope in this life. So go ahead and die in the most glorious way possible. It's a very nihilistic form of viewing Valhalla. And that's the most explicit form of nihilism that hopelessness brings up. But there's other forms of hopelessness that come up throughout the film. Max himself says at one point that hope is a delusion because he's just this man who's just trying to get by, but as the film goes along and he finds himself getting caught up with protecting the wives alongside Furiosa, he begins to gradually find a sense of hope, and through his smarts, he's able to find a way to redeem everybody. Furiosa thought that one way was going to work. It seemed like it was going to work at first until she realized a painful truth. So Max comforted her and the other lasses with a very smart idea. And the idea involves redemption. So, spoiler alert, we see redemption in restoring water from deep below the earth to a certain place. I'm probably not going to give away where they go to in case you don't know. And one specific character who previously believed in the concept of Valhalla, over a course of events, receives nurturing love from one of the other characters and begins to realize that his life does have worth. And so, in order to protect his friends, he sacrifices himself for love and not for self-glory. So his sense of making himself die has shifted from hopeless glory to selfless love. From dying for the sake of trying to get to Valhalla to the concept of no greater love than he who would die for his friends. It's rather profound when you think about it, because through that great love, this character dies in a way that is far greater than it ever would have been if he had kept the Valhalla mindset. You see this kind of conflict between hope and hopelessness, and it's portrayed brilliantly with strong visual storytelling. Of course, characters do converse and talk to each other and explain what's going on, but they don't over-explain it. They tell you just enough, and Max is the kind of person who usually communicates through gestures more so than actual words. And not everything is explicitly said to you, but fortunately with this kind of story, not everything needs to be explicitly said to you. For example, Max has these horrific flashbacks to people that he failed to save throughout the movie. Now, if you were to see this as a standalone movie, or even if you've seen the Mel Gibson movies, you're never going to get a clear idea as to who these specific characters are, except maybe the little girl who is implied to be Max's daughter from the first Mad Max movie. But the film never explicitly says as such by itself, and we're never told who these other characters are. In fact, to my knowledge, we never even saw them in the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies. But we don't need it to be explained to us, because whether you've seen the Mel Gibson movies or not, it's very clear that Max has had such a survival of the fittest mindset that he's going to make decisions that spiritually and mentally haunt him. We're never told how these flashbacks came to haunt him, but one particular flashback does, in a funny way, save his life. At one point, with that, and because Lewis pointed that out to me, thanks Lewis, and it's stuff like that where you get it, and I like that form of storytelling. Not everything needs to be spoon-fed to you. This film is smart enough to let the audience fill in the gaps for themselves. With that said, there are a few criticisms I would have for this specific movie. They don't ruin the experience per se. It's all an excellent film, but there are a few questionable things that kind of get distracting. The same way that there were a few elements of K-pop Demon Hunters that were distracting but didn't distract from the overall experience. Like, for example, with Nicholas Holt's character, he ends up with the crew at one point. He ends up with Furiosa and Max and the wives. And with how hostile they are to each other, why didn't Max and Furiosa kill him off? Why did they let him off and live? Was it to threaten the warlord with being humiliated or something? I don't even know why they spared him. It's obviously clear that he's being spared because he's part of the plot. Also, when they're traveling back to a certain place, wasn't there this entire intense action scene where they had to go through the mud and they almost sank their vehicle just to get through it? Was there like a path around it the whole time, or were they trying to get through this muddy bit just to lose the other bad guys? Like, stuff like that could have been explained a bit better, but again, they don't necessarily ruin the experience. So overall, I'm glad I got the chance to see Mad Max Fury Road. It is an excellent action film, and it needs to be studied in regards to directing and pacing and visual storytelling and overall great quality storytelling. Now, if you type up Mad Max Fury Road, there's plenty of video essays that have already done that kind of thing, so do yourself a favor and watch those if you haven't already. As for me, I gladly declare that Mad Max Fury Road by George Miller will get 11.5 out of 12. It is one of the strongest action movies out there, along the likes of the Indiana Jones movies, Terminator 2, and Aliens, and Rambo, and so many others I could name. It honestly stands tall, and if you haven't seen it already, I'd recommend giving it a watch. What did you think of Mad Max Fury Road? Let me know in the comments down below, and if there's any other elements of the film that you wanted to highlight, feel free to do so.
Wait! One more thing.
Also, please support my Just Giving page, as I'll be running the Loch Ness Marathon to raise funds for the My Name's Doddy Foundation. And to those of you who have already donated, I am very, very grateful for all your contributions. Your money is going to a great cause. MND is an awful disease that no one should have to go through. But through your funding, people are going to find a way to reverse the harm that M&D will do. So thank you so much. I'm very grateful. Let's restore hope to people's lives. ScotsThinker signing out.